50 metres below the surface of the Mediterranean, just off the fishing port of Porticello, the wreckage of the super yacht Bayesian sits in the crushing dark. The water at this depth is entirely stripped of the warmth and sunlight that characterises the Sicilian coast above. Down here, the pressure exerts roughly 6 atmospheres of force on every square inch of a diver's body, compressing the air in their lungs, thickening the nitrogen in their bloodstream, and turning every physical movement into a calculated negotiation with physics. This was the environment where, on the 9th of May 2025, 39-year-old Dutch diver Rob Haben lost his life while conducting preparatory work to sever the vessel's massive 75-metre aluminium mainmast. The tragedy of the Bayesian salvage operation threw a stark, unforgiving light on the extreme demands of commercial diving, specifically regarding the background and verified experience of the individuals sent into these hostile conditions. As noted in the aftermath, there were profound questions surrounding the accumulation of mandatory dives necessary for proper registration in the most authoritative professional registries. It highlighted a perilous trend where divers follow abbreviated training paths abroad, paths that inherently fail to guarantee the minimum required experience to survive when the margins for error evaporate. The International Marine Contractors Association, or IMCA, recognised this existential threat to the industry. In a note dated the 12th of June 2025, the organisation issued an unequivocal warning regarding schools that promise dangerous shortcuts into the world of professional diving. The warning was directed at a highly specific, rapidly proliferating problem: the lure of the top-up course. Abroad, particularly within the United Kingdom, training centres offer health and safety executive certificates and accelerated courses that last barely a single week. They package the illusion of competence into a 7-day window. But the mathematical reality of human physiology and mechanical proficiency is ruthless. It is entirely impossible to acquire the deeply ingrained muscle memory level training the offshore industry demands in just 7 days. Those who emerge from these abbreviated courses carry only a piece of paper. That document frequently fails to grant them entry into the necessary professional registries, leaving them in a dangerous administrative limbo, stripped of real recognition and fundamentally unprepared for the brutal realities of the ocean floor. Safety in the commercial offshore sector is not something that can be fast-tracked through intensive classroom sessions or easy stamps on a certificate. It is forged exclusively through hours spent submerged in the water, subjected to the cold, the isolation, and the relentless pressure. At serious institutions like CEDIFOP, a full member of the International Diving Schools Association, or IDSA, the logic of the shortcut is categorically rejected. The training adheres to a surgical precision that mirrors the exact IMCA recommendations. To understand the chasm between a 7-day top-up and legitimate offshore training, one must examine the specific mechanics of IDSA Level 3. Level 3 is the standard for surface-supplied offshore air diving, encompassing operations down to 50 metres. The progression is meticulously gated by actual, verifiable time spent breathing compressed gas at depth. For diving in the shallow range, from 0 to 30 metres, the absolute minimum requirement is 150 minutes of bottom time, distributed across at least 5 separate dives utilising an open bell. An open bell is a wet environment. The diver is exposed to the water column during the descent and ascent, relying entirely on their surface-supplied umbilical for life support, while the bell provides a structured platform and an emergency refuge. The requirements escalate sharply when the diver pushes past the 30-metre threshold, entering the twilight zone down to 50 metres. Here, the minimum mandated experience jumps to 310 minutes of bottom time across 10 separate dives. The diver must operate from a basket or a bell, and crucially, 2 of these dives must obligatorily touch the maximum depth of 50 meters. This is not a simulated depth in a hyperbaric chamber. It is raw, open water exposure. Furthermore, IDSA Level 3 demands a highly specific mechanical specialization, the operation of the hot water suit. At 50 meters, helium mixtures are often required to prevent nitrogen narcosis, but helium strips heat from the human body at an alarming rate. To prevent rapid, fatal hypothermia, the diver wears a specialized suit flooded with heated water, piped down from a surface boiler through the main umbilical, and distributed across the diver's chest, back, and limbs via a network of internal perforated tubes. The training mandates at least 3 dives using this equipment, each lasting a minimum of 30 minutes. The diver must learn to manage the thermal flush, communicating constantly with the surface to adjust the water temperature, ensuring they are neither scalded by water that is too hot, nor frozen by a sudden failure in the supply line. For divers attending schools that are not full members of IDSA, these exact numerical requirements must be doubled.
This punitive doubling makes the path incredibly protracted, or, as is tragically more common, leaves the diver's education painfully incomplete, substituting actual depth experience with theoretical knowledge. Beyond Level 3 lies the apex of the profession, IDSA Level 4. This is the domain of the closed bell diver. It represents the absolute summit of commercial diving, encompassing saturation operations and prolonged life within a hyperbaric environment. At this tier, precision ceases to be an operational guideline and becomes the sole mechanism for pure survival. Access to Level 4 is strictly prohibited unless the candidate already holds an IDSA Level 3 certificate or its precise equivalent, backed by certified work experience, visibly recorded and verified within their professional logbook. Saturation diving fundamentally alters the relationship between the human body and atmospheric pressure. Instead of enduring the lengthy, punishing decompression penalties required after a brief, deep, surface-oriented dive, the saturation diver is compressed to the working depth pressure and kept there. Their body tissues become completely saturated with the inert gas in their breathing mixture, typically a heliox blend of helium and oxygen. Once saturated, whether the diver stays at 50 or 100 meters for a day or a month, the decompression time required at the end of the job remains exactly the same. They live inside a pressurized habitat on the deck of a dynamically positioned dive support vessel, breathing the same pressurized gas, sleeping, eating, and existing in an entirely separate atmospheric reality from the crew just inches away on the other side of the steel bulkheads. For full member schools like CEDIFOP, the training for Level 4 requires a minimum of 10 closed bell dives and a total accumulated bottom time of 500 minutes. That equates to 8 hours and 20 minutes of actual in-water operations deployed from the closed bell. During these specific dives, the student cannot merely be a passenger. They must gain rigorous alternating experience in 2 distinct roles, as the active diver outside in the water and as the bellman inside the bell. The bellman is the diver's immediate lifeline. Positioned inside the pressurized, dry environment of the closed bell, the bellman manages the diver's excursion umbilical, feeding out the heavy bundle of gas hoses, communication wires, and hot water lines as the diver moves towards the worksite, and carefully taking up the slack to prevent fouling on subsea structures. The technical curriculum for Level 4 relies heavily on mastering the mechanics of transfer under pressure, universally known in the industry as TUP. TUP is the highly delicate mechanized process of moving human beings from the personnel transfer capsule, the closed diving bell, into the main hyperbaric living complex on the surface without ever exposing them to a drop in pressure. The bell is hoisted from the ocean floor by a specialized launch and recovery system, or LARS.
As the bell clears the splash zone and is brought onto the deck, it is meticulously manoeuvred to align with the mating flange of the main chamber complex. The clamping mechanism engages, locking the two massive steel modules together.
At this point, the trunk space between the bell's lower hatch and the chamber's side hatch is at normal surface atmospheric pressure. The operators must flood this trunk space with pressurized gas until it perfectly matches the internal pressure of the bell and the living chamber. Only then, with the pressure equalized, can the interlock systems be disengaged and the heavy steel doors be opened, allowing the divers to crawl through the short tunnel from the cramped bell into the slightly larger living quarters. If a mechanical seal fails during a transfer under pressure, or if an interlock is bypassed and a door is opened against a pressure differential, the resulting explosive decompression is instantly fatal. The training drills this procedure until it becomes pure instinct. Students learn to check the mating flanges, monitor the equalization valves, and communicate clearly through the helium speech unscramblers, which translate the high-pitched Donald Duck-like voices caused by breathing low-density helium into intelligible audio. Equally critical to the TUP process is the mastery of life support emergencies. The closed bell is an isolated capsule suspended in the water column. If something goes wrong, the surface crew cannot simply pull the divers up. Level 4 candidates must prove their ability to recover an unconscious diver into the bell. This requires the bellman to manually haul the dead weight of their partner up through the water column using the umbilical, physically drag them through the bottom hatch into the confined space of the bell, secure the hatch, and initiate emergency first aid, all while operating under the same immense pressure. They must demonstrate total competence in managing catastrophic failures in the onboard life support systems. This includes responding to a sudden loss of breathing gas by instantly switching to the onboard emergency bailout cylinders, handling a failure in the heating system, which can lead to rapid hypothermia, and maintaining operations during a total loss of communications with the surface dive control panel. This depth of practical, verifiable training is what separates true offshore professionals from those holding accelerated, paper-thin qualifications. But the industry does not rely solely on the integrity of the training schools to maintain these standards. In Italy, the barrier against the influx of underqualified divers from short foreign courses is codified into strict national law. The training path at CEDIFOP is explicitly validated by Decree 3173 of the Department of Labour, a piece of legislation that formally incorporates the stringent IMCA Circulars 1384 and 1385 into the legal framework. This legislative structure, specifically DPRS 13/2018, acts as an impenetrable wall. When a diver applies to change their professional position or seeks legitimate recognition to work on major offshore contracts, the Department of Labour scrutinises their documentation. If the recorded dive times and the total accumulated bottom minutes do not correspond exactly to the rigorous IDSA tables, the department flatly rejects the application. There is no grey area. Without the actual, verifiable in-water times achieved through a complete uncompressed training program, the individual is not legally recognised as an offshore diver. This legal rejection prevents their inclusion in the Industrial Diving Telematic Registry. This registry, meticulously managed by the Department of Labour, was established under the law of April 21, 2016, Number 7, Article 5, Paragraph 2. This specific law heavily regulates the training content required for the exercise of industrial diving activities. It mandates that titles and qualifications acquired at vocational training centres, centres that are accredited by the region and strictly conform to the prescribed IDSA standards, constitute the only suitable title for registration. Inclusion in this telematic registry is not merely a local bureaucratic hurdle, it is a credential that is recognisable and respected throughout the entire European community.
It signals to multinational contractors, salvage firms, and oil and gas operators that the diver in question has actually done the hard physical work required to survive the environment.
The enforcement of these standards is not abstract. It is a physical analog process of verification. On the 6th and 7th of May 2026, just days ago, Inspectors Leo Lagarde and Wim Gerrits descended upon CEDIFOP to conduct a rigorous audit of the facility and its students. Their objective was not to review online modules or multiple-choice test scores. They were there to verify the physical evidence of time spent at depth. They audited the students' heavy, water-stained logbooks, checking for the supervisor's signatures and the institutional stamps that corroborate every single minute of bottom time. They looked specifically for the documentation of those critical mandatory dives to 50 meters. They cross-referenced the equipment logs to ensure the hot water suits were actually deployed and operated for the required 30-minute durations. They verified that the mechanics of the closed bell and the transfer under pressure systems were actively utilised in the water, not just diagrammed on a whiteboard. When inspectors like Lagarde and Gerrits flip through a logbook, they are looking for the tangible proof of survival skills. They know that a diver who has only spent a week in a top-up course in the UK will have a logbook filled with blank pages where the deep, complex, mixed-gas dives should be. They know that without those hours spent managing a bulky umbilical in zero visibility, without the physical exhaustion of hauling an unconscious partner through a bottom hatch, the diver is a liability to themselves and to the entire dive team. The inspection is the final sieve, ensuring that only those who have subjected themselves to the full, uncompromising rigour of the IDSA standards are allowed to step onto a dynamically positioned vessel and enter the bell. Choosing a serious training path is fundamentally about choosing life. It is the conscious decision to reject the illusion of the easy shortcut and instead build a foundation of absolute, verifiable competence. A diver who completes the true IDSA Level 3 and Level 4 progression, logging every required minute, executing every transfer under pressure, and mastering the complex life support systems, builds a solid, unshakable career. It is a career that no serious contractor, no maritime insurance underwriter, and no governmental labour department can ever call into question. The depths demand respect, and that respect is paid in hours, not in expedited certificates. Recommend this episode to a colleague who needs to understand the unvarnished reality of commercial offshore training.